cities to broaden the kind of social scope of it.
It's interesting what you're saying too, you know, about wanting less anecdotal and more kind of tangible you know, results. Yeah. And you know, in some ways though, I think maybe that became a bit of a trap, you know, for arts educators. And you know, sort of thinking back to the debates in Congress and the culture wars in the 80s, where I think part of the way arts education and the arts in general got so politicized was politicians jumping on and saying, well, where's the benefit? Where's the economic benefit? And as we all know, you know, the benefits of art are things that seep down, you know, through consciousness over a long period of time, which isn't to say they can't be quantified, but getting off that binary is something that's important for our day.
I think that's a very, very good point. I think, yeah, it's sort of an obvious trap, and it may just relate back to where is art happening now? I mean, how do we, what is happening right now? What has changed and where is art taking place? And it may not be so much, you know, like actual numbers as a map where you can see where things have changed and what's come up in place of those things.
It's also fascinating with the School for the Arts downtown, that wonderful new building across the freeway, you know, from Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, which is a superb building if you've ever been in there. But of course, there's been a huge debate in the community of the people, local people, who said, well, what about, where's our new school? Where's our great new school? And I think the accommodation, after a huge back and forth, right, with the city, was now half of those spaces in that school are for the community. You know, because, and the other for kids, arts kids from all over the region.
And I think there's been that sort of accommodation happening in small ways in a lot of various communities where people have said, hey, what about us? Or what about our kids? But in some communities, there are people that aren't able to say that or don't have the time or wherewithal. So, I mean, that's a question too.
I think I saw a story recently where they were looking at what were the university degrees being granted in the U.S. And an astonishing number of them were in the fine arts. We're actually producing more artists than we are computer scientists and, you know, et cetera, like name the category is like an astonishing high number. Which sort of asks the question, sort of like, so how do people get to the point where when they're at college, and that's the thing that they're studying, if arts education in sort of public education realm is falling away and has been for a long time?
Well, and it's interesting because there is a focus now on the sort of harder subjects, right? So the drive is math and science specifically at these higher education institutions. So it's interesting. It would be interesting to look at, you know, the numbers doing fine arts. You know, that made me think of this Monterey Continuation School, this group that I covered, that they were doing a play, and it was sort of examining like local uprisings of immigrant farm workers and sort of some very, very local Los Angeles issues that you don't generally learn about or you wouldn't hear about unless there was a specific section dedicated to that. In general history, you don't necessarily learn about Cesar Chavez. I mean, you learn about it in broad terms, but you don't learn about the specific uprisings that came around and various groups. And the curriculum is changing, but still. These kids at a continuation school, they're having, a lot of them are dropouts. I mean, they've left school, they've been ordered to take part in this specific program, and they did a play there where they assumed roles of these various migrant workers and their various stances on this issue. And they felt, I mean, I spoke with some of the students afterwards, and for them it wasn't, I mean, it was art, they were performing, but it was a history lesson, and it was a lesson in self-confidence, and a lesson in working in a team, and a lesson in working with others. I mean, and a lesson in looking vulnerable in front of a group of people and taking a risk. And there were so many things that came out of that project for them, as well as a pride in their own history. A lot of them are Latino, and it was really amazing to speak with them. I didn't have any expectations about what I would learn, frankly, and for them, they found a lot of them were considering going into arts themselves because They weren't good at math, they couldn't read well or speak English well, in their view, but this was something they could really do.
I'm having an excited moment.
We'll all turn our
As
heads.
opposed to.
Well, which I'm fully to be rejected totally, but I'm beginning to think that maybe we should look in a very contained place at all three of these questions. And I'm thinking about downtown in part because of what Reed said about the census and it being the most diverse place. I'm thinking about the schools that we're mentioning. There are many schools in there. I'm thinking about these binary questions of why art here and not there, which can even be localized between Little Tokyo and the Arts District, Little Tokyo and Chinatown. I mean, you can walk one street and ask that question. And I'm wondering if we can't sort of pull the threads. I love the idea of reframing the question because that you said that. And I thought, this is really interesting. I mean, we're all really smart people. We don't want to go over the same old round because none of us enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we reframe the questions? And I was thinking actually each one of these projects is a question that will allow for new ideas, new exposure. And is it possible, like you said, you started out locally and you said, and actually nationally. But is it possible that by looking at a contained neighborhood, and you know this from doing the LXU projects, is it possible to extrapolate from that to something larger?
Absolutely.
Right. So wouldn't that be exciting if we drilled down?
And I mean, what you brought up about Finland, I mean, frankly, globally, what happens in the countries where arts takes a top shelf seat?
In Finland, everybody has to do arts. It's part of the education. You cannot go
So
through the school. I mean, I can get you the data of, you know, how people are doing. I mean, why kids are doing so well at school and why they have such good results from Finland, probably English. I mean, it's just can be a good example.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Go.
No, senor.
The only thing that I have to say about downtown is that it's a very interesting sort of pregnant place with a lot of discussion. But there's a lot of traditional art venues that may complicate our research. And that's my only, you know, you have the music center, you have Locas, you have, you know, the Philharmonics, you have the Kerbo, you have the, we will have to.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't not. And then with all the I don't know, I mean, it could be,
I'm
we
sort of
could
thinking
find some.
you sort of take Main Street and you go.
I'm also thinking is like, I think geography needs to be a part in this. I'm not sure that it needs to be the defining part of this. You know, in other words, like if I was to take the historical view, right, when they first started cutting arts education in the 80s, the argument against it was that it would have a terrible impact on the cultural vitality of the country. While in fact, what we've seen since the 80s to now is an enormous expansion in the amount of creativity and arts activity, even in the traditional forms that happened, right? So I guess what I'm wondering is sort of like, where do we figure out where the cause and effects are? You know, where can we say, because you're right, the sort of, you know, just pointing to what they call extrinsic values of something. It's like, where is the social good, which is what all the funders are talking about right now, right? All the politicians are talking about right now, leads you down these bad paths. Because as soon as you say, oh man, we had 1 million people who went and looked at this. Okay, what happens next year when you have 900,000? So they say, hey, it's just going down, we shouldn't do anything, right? So when you put yourself on that path, all sorts of bad possible effects can happen. And we've had a couple of decades of concentrating on extrinsic rather than intrinsic benefits. So in a way, it's sort of, I think we've got a mix of sort of historical context. We have a sense of geographical context. You know, what else? You know, I would be, I think we do need to have some sort of geographical limitation, but I wouldn't want to make it sort of artificially set in a way that
There's,
hampers.
you know, in Whittier, I don't know if you guys have been in Whittier or not, but in Whittier, there is a huge booming music scene with these teenagers,
Richard Nixon is
right?
there.
And they have created.
Better yet, he died there.
Oh, maybe he was.
Nixon.
Nixon. And they have created, you know, they're like all these rockabilly sort of Latino sound that is now very popular in Japan, and there are these independent record labels. Nobody knows about it here, right? And communities like that, where you have all these complications, these sort of contested spaces that young people take over, or you know, I think there's a reason why all these funders are looking at El Monte and Bakersfield
And San Bernardino.
and San Bernardino and San Bernardino, Riverside. The city of Riverside is a lot of stuff is going on over there in so many different ways, with the Occupy, with even Fullerton, you know. So if you are asking to reframe the question, I would reframe the geography as well. In my, not that I don't, I mean, I think downtown is amazing, but everybody's sort of looking at it.
Yeah. It's just easier, it's closer.
True. That's true.
I actually am kidding. I think it's fascinating what you're saying. Like kind of an untapped territory where you can, that doesn't